The steel door slammed shut with a sound that echoed through the prison corridor. Captain Marcus Thorne stood perfectly still, his red ceremonial uniform stark against the gray walls. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. His face showed nothing, but inside, his heart was racing. He had just done something that could cost him everything: his career, his honor, perhaps even his life. 20 minutes earlier, Marcus had been standing guard outside the royal palace, as he had done for 15 years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard. Tourists took pictures. Children pointed at his tall bearskin hat. He never moved, never blinked. That was his job. To be a statue. To be silent. To be invisible. But today was different. A young woman had approached him during his shift. She was thin, with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed a folded piece of paper into his white glove. "Please," she whispered. "Please read it. You're my last hope." Marcus couldn't respond. Couldn't even look at her. The rules were absolute. Royal guards did not break protocol. Not for anyone. Not for anything. Security moved her along quickly. She glanced back once, tears streaming down her face. Then she was gone. For 3 hours, Marcus stood at attention with that paper burning in his glove. His mind was screaming questions, but his body remained frozen. When his shift finally ended, he walked to the changing room with measured steps. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. The words on that page would change everything. If you want to know what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. This story gets intense, and you won't want to miss a single moment. The letter was handwritten. The ink had smudged in places, like tears had fallen on the paper as it was written. Marcus read it 3 times, his jaw tightening with each word. "My brother Thomas Hartley has been in Blackwood Prison for 10 years. He was convicted of stealing jewels from the royal treasury. But he's innocent. I have proof. I've been to every lawyer, every official, every newspaper. No one will listen. No one cares about a poor man in prison. You're my last hope, please. He's dying. The guards say he has maybe 6 months left. Please." Attached to the letter was a photocopy of a document. A confession. Signed by a man named Richard Vale, a former Treasury official. The confession was dated 8 years ago. It stated clearly that Vale had stolen the jewels and framed Thomas Hartley to cover his tracks. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. He knew that name. Richard Vale had died 5 years ago in a car accident. This confession had been hidden, buried, forgotten, and Thomas Hartley had rotted in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Marcus made a decision in that moment. A decision that went against everything he'd been trained to do. Everything he believed about order and duty. Following the chain of command, he was going to fix this himself today. Because sometimes the system fails. And when it does, someone has to step up, even if it destroys them. Marcus changed out of his ceremonial uniform and into civilian clothes. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, along with his military identification. Then he walked out of the palace and caught a bus heading north, toward Blackwood Prison. The prison loomed ahead now. As Marcus approached the main gate, gray concrete walls stretched 30 feet high. Barbed wire coiled along the top like a metal snake. Guard towers stood at each corner, their searchlights sweeping the grounds even in daylight. Marcus had never been to a prison before. The smell hit him first. Disinfectant, trying to mask something worse. Despair? Maybe. Or just time moving too slowly. He showed his military ID at the first checkpoint. The guard, a heavy-set man with coffee breath, barely glanced at it. "Purpose of visit?" "Official inquiry," Marcus said. His voice was steady, calm, regarding prisoner Thomas Hartley. The guard picked up a phone. Made a call. Hung up. Waved Marcus through. It was easier than it should have been. Marcus walked through 3 more checkpoints. Each time, his military credentials opened doors that should have been locked. People saw the ID and assumed authority. Assumed legitimacy. No one questioned a royal guard. Finally, Marcus stood outside cell block D. A young guard with nervous eyes led him down a hallway lined with cells. The sound of men coughing, muttering, crying. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects. "Hartley's at the end," the guard said. "Number 47. Marcus nodded, kept walking, and that's when he saw him. Thomas Hartley sat on a narrow cot, his back against the wall. He was thin. Too thin. His hair had gone completely gray, though his face suggested he was only in his 40s. His hands rested on his knees, and his eyes stared at nothing. He looked like a man who had given up. Asterisk. Marcus stood at the cell door for a long moment. He studied the man inside. Thomas didn't look up. Didn't seem to notice he had a visitor, Thomas Hartley. Marcus said quietly. The man's eyes shifted slowly. It took him a moment to focus. When he finally looked at Marcus, there was no curiosity in his expression. No hope. Just exhaustion. "Yeah," Thomas said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much anymore. "Who's asking?" Marcus glanced down the hallway. The young guard had walked away, back toward the checkpoint. They were alone. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm a captain in the Royal Guard." He kept his voice low, steady. "Your sister gave me a letter. And a confession." Something changed in Thomas's eyes. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was something. A flicker. Like a candle being lit in a dark room. "Sarah came to you." Thomas stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. He moved to the bars of his cell. "She's been trying for years. No one listens. No one cares?" "I'm listening now," Marcus said. Thomas laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You're 10 years too late, friend. But I appreciate the gesture." "I read Richard Vale's confession," Marcus continued. "The one he wrote before he died. The one that says he framed you." Thomas gripped the bars. His knuckles went white. "You have it? You actually have it?" "I have a copy. And take it to a judge. Take it to the warden. Take it to someone who can do something." Thomas's voice cracked. "Please, I'm dying in here. The doctors say my kidneys are failing. I have maybe 6 months. Maybe less." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded papers. He held them up so Thomas could see. "I could take this to a judge," Marcus said slowly. "I could file it through proper channels. Start an appeals process. Then do it," Thomas said. "Please." "That process takes time. Months. Maybe years. You don't have that." Thomas's face fell. The flicker in his eyes started to dim. "But," Marcus continued, "there's another way." Thomas looked up. "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned closer to the bars. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I mean, I'm going to walk you out of here today. Right now." For 5 seconds, Thomas just stared at him. Then he shook his head. "You're crazy. You can't do that. They'll shoot us both before we make it 10 feet. Not if we do it right," Marcus said. "Why?" Thomas asked. The question hung in the air between them. "Why would you risk everything for me? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a moment. His jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because I spent 15 years standing guard outside a palace. 15 years protecting a system that's supposed to represent justice, honor, truth." He looked Thomas directly in the eyes. "But what good is that system if it fails people like you? If it locks up innocent men and throws away the key, you'll lose everything," Thomas said. "Maybe," Marcus replied. "But I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." Thomas searched Marcus's face. Looking for doubt? For hesitation? He found none. "How?" Thomas finally asked. Marcus pulled out his military identification again. He held it up. "This ID has gotten me through 4 checkpoints already. People see Royal Guard credentials and they don't ask questions. They assume authority." He glanced down the hallway. "We're going to walk out of here together. You're going to be my prisoner transfer." "That's insane." "It's bold," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. I'll have paperwork, forms, procedures, not if we move fast. Confidence is everything. We act like we belong, like this is routine, and most people won't question it." Marcus pulled a second ID from his pocket. "A visitor's badge. Put this on. If anyone asks, You're being transferred to the royal court for testimony in a related case. Thomas took the badge with shaking hands. And if someone does question it, then we adapt. Thomas pinned the badge to his prison uniform. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely make his fingers work. I haven't been outside in 10 years, he said quietly. I've forgotten what the sun feels like. You're about to remember. Marcus called the young guard back. The kid appeared within seconds, his keys jangling on his belt. I need this cell opened, Marcus said. His voice had changed. It was harder now, more commanding. Prisoner transferred to royal court. Orders from the Justice Ministry. The young guard blinked. I didn't get any paperwork about a transfer. It came through this morning, Marcus said without hesitation. High priority. If you want to call the warden to confirm, go ahead. But I was told this needs to happen within the hour, and every minute we wait is another minute I'm behind schedule. The guard hesitated. Marcus could see him doing the math in his head, causing a delay for a royal guard, questioning someone with obvious authority. Making waves, I really should check, the guard started. Then check, Marcus said firmly. But when the warden asks why his orders weren't followed promptly, I'll make sure he knows who caused the delay. The guard's face went pale. He fumbled with his keys. No. It's fine. I'm sure it's fine. He unlocked the cell door. The metal creaked as it swung open. Thomas stepped out. His legs wobbled. He grabbed the door frame to steady himself. Marcus took his arm, firmly, like an officer escorting a prisoner. Let's go, he said. They walked down the hallway side by side. Marcus kept his grip on Thomas's arm. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to look official. Thomas stared straight ahead. His breathing was quick and shallow. At the first checkpoint, a female guard looked up from her desk. Transfer, she asked. Royal court, Marcus said. Testimony required in a treasury case. She glanced at Thomas. At his badge? At Marcus's ID? She picked up a clipboard and scanned it. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. If she looked too closely, if she made a call, the guard set down her clipboard, waved them through. They kept walking. Second checkpoint. Third checkpoint. Each time, Marcus gave the same explanation. Each time, his credentials opened the door. Thomas's eyes were getting wider. He was starting to believe this might actually work. And then they reached the final gate. The main entrance. The last barrier between prison and freedom. The guard at the main gate was different from the others. Older, harder. His nameplate read Sergeant Morrison. He had the look of someone who'd seen every trick, heard every lie. He didn't wave them through. Hold up, Morrison said. He stood from his desk and walked around to face them. His eyes moved from Marcus to Thomas and back again. Royal court transfer. That's correct, Marcus said. His voice stayed level, calm. Funny thing, Morrison said slowly. I've been working this gate for 23 years. Every transfer that goes out of here, I see the paperwork first. Usually days in advance. He crossed his arms. I didn't see anything about this. Marcus felt Thomas tense beside him. Felt the man's arms start to shake under his grip. It came through this morning, Marcus said. Emergency request from the Justice Ministry. High priority case. High priority, Morrison repeated. He didn't sound convinced. What case? Treasury theft. Related to the Vale investigation, Morrison's eyes narrowed. Richard Vale's been dead for 5 years, which is why they need testimony from witnesses who were involved in the original case, Marcus said without missing a beat. New evidence has come to light. The court needs to review previous testimonies. It was a good lie. Plausible. Detailed enough to sound real. Morrison studied them for a long moment. Then he turned to his computer and started typing. Let me just pull up the file, he said. Marcus's mind raced. They had seconds. Maybe less. Once Morrison looked at Thomas's file, he'd see there was no transfer order. No court date, nothing, and then alarms would sound. Sergeant Marcus said, his voice sharp, I don't have time for this. I have a schedule to keep, And every minute we stand here is another minute I'm late. Won't take but a second, Morrison said, still typing. Thomas's breathing was getting faster. Marcus could feel panic rising off him like heat. "Sarah?" Thomas suddenly whispered, so quiet only Marcus could hear. "If this goes wrong, tell Sarah I tried. Tell her I'm sorry." Marcus didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Morrison's screen. The sergeant stopped typing. He leaned forward, squinting at whatever he was reading. His hand moved toward his radio. This was it. The moment everything fell apart. "Sergeant Morrison," a voice called from behind them. Everyone turned. A woman in a business suit was walking toward the gate from the parking lot. She held a briefcase and a visitor badge. Her heels clicked against the concrete. "I've been trying to reach you," she said, slightly out of breath. "There was an administrative error this morning. The transfer order for prisoner Hartley should have been on your desk hours ago." Morrison's hand froze over his radio. "Who are you?" The woman reached into her briefcase and pulled out an official-looking document. She handed it to Morrison. "Rebecca Chen, Justice Ministry. The paperwork got held up in processing. I drove here myself to sort it out." She glanced at Marcus and Thomas. "Has the transfer already been initiated?" Morrison took the document, started reading it. His brow furrowed. Marcus's mind was spinning. Who was this woman? How did she know? And then he saw it. The briefcase. The same handwriting on the document that he'd seen on Sarah's letter. This was Sarah Thomas's sister. She'd followed him to the prison, and now she was lying through her teeth to save her brother. Morrison looked up from the document. "This says the transfer was supposed to happen yesterday." "Exactly," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Which is why I'm here. To apologize for the delay and to ensure the prisoner gets to court on time. The hearing is scheduled for this afternoon." Morrison looked at the document again, then at his computer screen, then back at the document. Marcus could see him weighing his options. Make a fuss and potentially cause problems with the Justice Ministry, or just let this go and get back to his coffee. "Fine," Morrison finally said. He handed the document back to Sarah and pressed a button on his desk. "But next time, make sure the paperwork comes through properly." The main gate started to slide open, the sound of metal grinding on metal. The most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. "Thank you, Sergeant," Sarah said smoothly. "I'll file a report about the administrative error." Marcus guided Thomas forward. Through the gate, past the threshold, out into the parking lot. The sun hit them like a wave. Thomas stopped walking. He tilted his face up toward the sky and closed his eyes. His whole body started to shake. "Keep moving," Marcus said quietly. "Not yet." He made it to Sarah's car. A small blue sedan parked near the back of the lot. She unlocked it with trembling hands. Thomas got into the back seat. Sarah slid behind the wheel. Marcus took the passenger seat. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Sarah started the car and drove toward the exit. They passed the guard booth, past the outer fence, turned onto the main road, and only then did Thomas break down. He sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from the bottom of his soul. Sarah was crying too, tears streaming down her face as she drove. Marcus stared straight ahead. His hands were shaking. He realized he'd been holding his breath. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. But this was just the beginning. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Somewhere safe," Marcus said. "Somewhere we can figure out our next move." "They'll notice he's gone," Thomas said between sobs. "They'll come looking." "I know," Marcus said, "which is why we need to move fast. We need to get this confession to someone who can do something with it. Someone with real power." "Who?" Sarah asked. "I've tried everyone. No one would listen." Marcus pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and stopped on one name. Lady Catherine Ashford, the king's legal advisor, a woman he'd stood guard for dozens of times, a woman who'd always treated him with respect, who'd once told him that justice mattered more than politics. He hoped she'd meant it. "Oh, I know someone," Marcus said. He press dialed. The phone rang 3 times. Then a familiar voice answered, "This is Lady Ashford." "Lady Catherine, this is Captain Marcus Thorne. Royal Guard. I need your help with something urgent." There was a pause. "Captain Thorne." "What's wrong?" "I'm with a man named Thomas Hartley. He was wrongfully convicted of theft 10 years ago. I have evidence that proves his innocence, and I need someone with authority to look at it." Another pause. "Longer this time? Where are you?" Lady Catherine finally asked. "Just outside Blackwood Prison." "Where is Thomas Hartley supposed to be?" Marcus took a breath. "Inside Blackwood Prison?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Captain Thorne," Lady Catherine said slowly, "did you just break a prisoner out of a royal facility?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. "I did." Lady Catherine didn't speak for 10 seconds. Marcus could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Measured, controlled. The sound of someone thinking very carefully about what to say next. "Are you aware," she finally said, her voice tight, "that what you've just done is a crime? Multiple crimes, actually. Breaking and entering. Prisoner, escape. Abuse of authority. You could go to prison yourself, Captain." "I'm aware," Marcus said. "And you did it anyway." "I did." Sarah drove in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Thomas sat in the back seat, his eyes wide, listening to every word. "Tell me why," Lady Catherine said. "And it better be a damn good reason." Marcus explained everything. The letter, the confession, Richard Vale, the 10 years Thomas had lost. The 6 months he had left to live. When he finished, there was another long silence. "Send me the confession," Lady Catherine said. "Right now, take a picture and send it to my personal number." Marcus did. His hands were steady as he photographed the document and hit send. He heard her phone buzz on the other end, heard her move papers around, heard her whisper something he couldn't make out. "This is dated 8 years ago," she said. "Yes, ma'am. And you're telling me no one saw this until now?" "Vale's widow found it in his personal papers after he died. She gave it to Sarah Hartley. Sarah tried to get it to officials, but no one would take her seriously. Because she's the sister of a convicted criminal," Lady Catherine said. "They assumed she was lying." Yes. More silence. Marcus could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. "Where are you right now?" she asked. Marcus looked at Sarah. She mouthed an address. He repeated it to Lady Catherine. "Stay there," she said. "Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'm making some calls. If this confession is real, if it checks out, then we have a serious problem, and we need to handle it very carefully." "How long?" Marcus asked. "Give me 2 hours, maybe 3. "I need to verify some things, Lady Catherine," Marcus said, his voice harder now. "The prison will notice Thomas is missing soon. When they do, they'll lock down the city. They'll start searching. We don't have 2 hours. Then I suggest you find somewhere very private to hide," she said. "Because if you get caught before I can build a case, there's nothing I can do for any of you." The line went dead. Sarah pulled into a parking garage. An old, forgotten structure near the industrial district. Most of the spaces were empty. She parked on the 3rd level, behind a concrete pillar where the car couldn't be seen from the ramps. They sat in silence for a moment. "Now what?" Sarah asked. "Now we wait," Marcus said. Thomas leaned forward from the back seat. "I need you both to understand something. If this goes wrong, I'm taking the blame. All of it. You two tried to help me. That's all. I forced you. I threatened you, Thomas," Sarah started. "No," he said firmly. "I mean it. I'm dying anyway. 6 months. Maybe less. But you two have lives ahead of you. I'm not letting you throw them away for me." Marcus turned in his seat to look at Thomas. The man's face was gaunt, tired, but there was steel in his eyes. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Marcus said. They waited. 1 hour passed. Then, too, Sarah bought sandwiches from a corner store and brought them back to the car. None of them ate much. Thomas stared out the window at the city's skyline. He watched cars pass on the street below, watched people walking, living their lives. "I used to work in construction," he said quietly. "Before all this, I was good at it too. Built parts of the new library downtown. I'd drive past it sometimes and feel proud, you know? Like I'd made something that mattered. Sarah reached back and squeezed his hand. You'll build again, she said. When this is over, you'll build again. Thomas smiled. It was a sad smile. Maybe. Marcus's phone rang. He answered immediately. Captain Thorne. Lady Catherine's voice was different now. Harder. More focused. I've verified the confession. I've spoken with 3 judges and the Attorney General. Richard Vale did write this. His handwriting matches. The details check out. Thomas Hartley is innocent. Marcus felt something release in his chest, a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying. What happens now? He asked. Now we fix this. But it has to be done right. The Attorney General is preparing emergency paperwork. A full pardon, signed by the king himself. But we need Thomas to come in voluntarily. No more running. No more hiding. Where? The royal courthouse. Come to the north entrance. I'll meet you there myself. We'll get him processed, documented, and released properly, officially. In the prison? They must have noticed he's missing by now. They have. There's a warrant out for his arrest. And for yours, Captain, which is why you need to come in now, before this gets any worse. Marcus looked at Thomas. At Sarah, can you promise me he'll be safe? Marcus asked. That they won't just throw him back in a cell? You have my word, Lady Catherine said. The king is personally involved now. He's furious that this happened under his justice system. Thomas Hartley will walk out of that courthouse a free man today. You have my word. Marcus trusted her. He didn't have many options, but he trusted her. We'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. They drove to the courthouse in silence. Marcus watched the streets, watched for police cars. For signs they were being followed. Nothing. The royal courthouse was a massive stone building with columns and wide steps leading up to the entrance. The north entrance was smaller. More private. Lady Catherine was waiting there exactly as she'd promised. She wore a dark blue suit and stood with perfect posture. 2 other officials stood beside her. Legal advisors, Marcus guessed. Sarah parked the car. They all got out together. Thomas stumbled on the first step. His legs were weak. Marcus caught his arm and steadied him. It's okay, Marcus said quietly. Almost there. They climbed the steps together. Lady Catherine watched them approach. Her face was unreadable. When they reached the top, she extended her hand to Thomas. Mr. Hartley, she said, my name is Lady Catherine Ashford. On behalf of the Crown and the justice system, I owe you an apology. What happened to you should never have happened, and we are going to make it right. Tomo shook her hand. His eyes were filling with tears again. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. Lady Catherine turned to Marcus. Her expression was harder now. Captain Thorne, what you did was illegal, reckless, and completely outside protocol. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. It was also, she continued, the most honorable thing I've seen in my 30 years of legal service. Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected that. The king wants to meet you, Lady Catherine said. After we finish with Mr. Hartley's paperwork, he has some questions. And possibly a proposal? A proposal? She smiled slightly. Let's just say there may be a new position opening up in the royal service. One that requires someone willing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. She gestured toward the door. Shall we? They walked inside together, but their relief would be short-lived, because someone else was waiting inside that courthouse. Someone who didn't want Thomas Hartley to go free. The courthouse entrance hall was marble and gold. High ceilings. Windows that stretched stories. Their footsteps echoed as they walked. Lady Catherine led them toward a conference room on the 2nd floor. Security nodded them through checkpoints. Everything felt official, safe, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They turned a corner and nearly collided with a man in an expensive suit. He was mid-40s, with silver hair and cold eyes. A prosecutor's badge hung from his pocket. The man stopped walking. His eyes locked on Thomas. "Catherine," he said slowly. "What's going on here?" Lady Catherine's expression didn't change. "James, I didn't expect to see you today." "I work here," James said. His voice had an edge to it. "Though apparently I'm the last to know what's happening in my own courthouse." His eyes moved to Thomas, to Sarah, to Marcus. "Would someone like to explain why a convicted felon is walking through these halls?" "Thomas Hartley's conviction is being overturned," Lady Catherine said calmly. "New evidence has come to light. A full pardon is being processed as we speak." James's face went red. "A pardon? Based on what evidence?" "A signed confession from Richard Vale, admitting that he framed Mr. Hartley." James went very still. For just a moment, something flashed across his face. Fear? Anger? It was gone too quickly to tell. "Richard Vale is dead," James said. "Which is why his confession is particularly significant," Lady Catherine replied. "Dead men rarely lie. Where is this confession? I want to see it." Lady Catherine pulled the document from her briefcase and handed it to him. James snatched it and began reading. His jaw tightened with every line. Thomas watched him carefully. There was something in his expression. Recognition. "You were the prosecutor," Thomas said suddenly. His voice was quiet but steady. 10 years ago. "You were the one who put me away." James looked up from the confession. Their eyes met. "I prosecuted the case, yes," James said. "Based on the evidence I was given, evidence that clearly showed you were guilty." "Evidence that was planted," Thomas said. "By Richard Vale." "So this confession claims," James said. He held up the paper. "But how do we know it's real? Vale could have written this for any number of reasons. Maybe he was ill. Maybe his judgment was compromised. Maybe someone forced him to write it." "The handwriting has been verified," Lady Catherine said. "The details match case files that weren't public. There's no question about its authenticity." "There are always questions," James said sharply. He turned to Lady Catherine. "You're making a mistake. A huge mistake. If you overturn this conviction, you're opening the door to every criminal who wants a second chance. You're undermining the entire justice system." "The justice system already undermined itself," Marcus said. His voice was hard. "When it locked up an innocent man?" James looked at Marcus for the first time. Really looked at him. "And you are?" "Captain Marcus Thorne. Royal Guard." "The one who broke him out of prison," James said. It wasn't a question. "I heard the reports. Very heroic. Very reckless." "Tell me, Captain, do you always decide which laws to follow and which to break?" "Only when the law fails to deliver justice," Marcus said. James stepped closer. "Justice is a process. It's rules and procedures and oversight. It's not something you get to decide on your own." "The process failed Thomas Hartley," Marcus said. "It took 10 years of his life. It's taking his health. Someone had to do something. Someone like you," James said with contempt. "A soldier playing judge and jury." "Enough," Lady Catherine said. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife. "James, I understand your concerns, but the decision has been made. The Attorney General has signed off. The King has signed off. This is happening." James's hands were shaking. He was still holding the confession, and now his fingers were crushing the edges of the paper. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said quietly. "What this means?" "I understand perfectly," Lady Catherine said. "An innocent man is going free. That's what it means." James looked at each of them in turn. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "Fine," he finally said. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." He turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. A door slammed somewhere in the distance. Sarah let out a breath she'd been holding. "Who was that?" "James Mitchell," Lady Catherine said. "Lead prosecutor. He's handled hundreds of cases over his career. He doesn't like being proven wrong." "There's something else," Thomas said. He was staring down the hallway where James had disappeared. The way he looked at that confession. It wasn't surprise. It was fear. Marcus had noticed it too. "You think he knew?" "About Vale?" Thomas nodded slowly. "I think he knew more than he's saying." Lady Catherine's expression darkened. If that's true, we have a much bigger problem than we thought. She led them into the conference room and closed the door. The room was wood-paneled with a long table and leather chairs. Windows overlooked the city. "Wait here," Lady Catherine said. "I need to make some calls. Marcus, keep an eye on the door."
Ow.
She left. The door clicked shut behind her. Thomas sank into one of the chairs. He looked exhausted. Sarah sat beside him and took his hand. Marcus stood by the window. He watched the street below. Cars passed. People walked. Life continued. But his mind was racing. Something James had said bothered him. The way he'd reacted to the confession. The way he'd tried to discredit it. Marcus pulled out his phone. He opened a search engine and typed in James Mitchell. Prosecutor. The results filled his screen, articles, case summaries, photos, and then he saw something that made his blood run cold. An article from 12 years ago. A photo of a younger James Mitchell shaking hands with Richard Vale at a charity event. The caption read, "Prosecutor James Mitchell and Treasury official Richard Vale at the annual Justice Foundation Gala." They'd known each other. Personally, Marcus kept scrolling. Found more articles, more photos. James and Richard at multiple events. Always together. Always smiling. They'd been friends. Marcus's mind connected the dots. Richard Vale steals from the Treasury. Frames Thomas Hartley. James Mitchell prosecutes the case. Make sure Thomas gets convicted. Make sure the real thief stays safe. And when Vale writes a confession 8 years later, maybe out of guilt, James would have had every reason to make sure it never saw the light of day. Marcus turned from the window. "We need to tell Lady Catherine." "Tell her what?" Sarah asked. James Mitchell wasn't just the prosecutor. He was Richard Vale's friend. They knew each other for years. He might have been involved in the framing. Thomas stood up. "If that's true, he's going to try to stop this pardon. He can't let me go free. Not if it means the truth comes out." As if on cue, the building's fire alarm began to ring, loud, piercing, echoing through every hallway. Marcus ran to the door and tried to open it. It was locked from the outside. They were trapped. The fire alarm screamed through the building. Marcus threw his shoulder against the door. Once, twice. It didn't budge. The windows. Sarah shouted over the noise. Marcus ran to the nearest window. It was the old-fashioned kind, with a latch. He flipped it open and looked down. They were 2 stories up. Below was concrete, not an option. "There has to be another way out," Thomas said. His voice was shaking. Marcus scanned the room. 1 door, 3 windows. Wood paneling on the walls? Nothing helpful. And then he smelled at smoke. Not the sharp smell of an electrical fire or burnt food. This was something else. Deliberate. Chemical. Someone had set this fire on purpose. "We're not waiting," Marcus said. He picked up a chair and swung it at the door. The wood cracked, but held. He swung again. Harder. The door splintered near the lock. One more hit, and it broke open. Smoke poured into the room. From the hallway, thick and black. The alarm was even louder now. Marcus pulled his jacket over his mouth. "Stay low. Follow me." They moved into the hallway. The smoke was worse here. It burned Marcus's eyes and throat. He could hear shouting somewhere below. People evacuating, but the smoke was coming from above. From the 3rd floor, someone was making sure they couldn't go up, forcing them down into the arms of whoever was waiting. "The stairs," Marcus said, pointing to the emergency exit sign glowing through the smoke. They stumbled forward. Thomas was coughing badly. Sarah supported him, her arm around his waist. Marcus reached the stairwell door, yanked it open. James Mitchell was standing on the landing below. He wasn't alone. 3 men in security uniforms stood with him. But these weren't regular courthouse security. Marcus could tell by the way they stood, by the weapons on their hips. Private contractors, mercenaries. "Captain Thorne," James said. His voice was calm. to calm. I was hoping we could avoid this. Marcus stepped in front of Thomas and Sarah. Avoid what exactly? Avoid the complications, James said. Thomas Hartley can't leave this building. I'm sorry, but that's how this has to end. He set the fire, Marcus said. A necessary distraction. The building will be evacuated. In the confusion, a convicted felon tried to escape. Tragically, he didn't make it out. James's face was cold, motionless. These things happen. Lady Catherine knows we're here, Marcus said. The king knows. You can't make us disappear. I don't need to make you disappear, Captain. Just him. James nodded toward Thomas. You and the sister, you'll be fine. You were caught in the fire, overcome by smoke. By the time you recover, Hartley will be gone. Tragic accident. Very unfortunate. One of the contractors moved forward. His hand rested on his weapon. Marcus didn't move. His mind was calculating distances, angles, options. 3 armed men. A narrow stairwell. Thomas was weak. Sarah was untrained. Their chances of fighting through were almost 0. But Marcus had spent 15 years standing still, learning patience, reading people. And he could see something James' suit. Fear. James was afraid. Desperately afraid. Because if Thomas lived, if he testified, the whole story would come out. How James had helped Richard Vale. How he'd knowingly convicted an innocent man. How he'd buried evidence for years. James would lose everything. His career, his reputation, possibly his freedom. That fear made him dangerous. But it also made him sloppy. You knew Vale stole those jewels, Marcus said quietly. You helped him frame Thomas? James's eye twitched. You can't prove that. Vale's confession mentions a prosecutor who knew the truth. He doesn't name you directly, but he describes meetings, conversations. Lady Catherine is probably reading it more carefully right now. Connecting the same dots I did, then I'll deal with her too, James said. His voice was harder now, more desperate. Whatever it takes, James, Marcus said carefully. Think about what you're doing. Killing us won't save you. It'll only make it worse. Lady Catherine isn't alone. The Attorney General is involved. The king himself. You can't kill everyone. I can make enough of them disappear to muddy the waters, James said. Create reasonable doubt. Blame it on a fire. An accident. By the time anyone pieces together the truth, I'll be gone. The contractor took another step forward. His hand moved to his weapon, and then a new voice echoed through the stairwell. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Lady Catherine stood at the top of the stairs. She wasn't alone. 6 royal guards flanked her. Real ones. With their ceremonial swords drawn, the Attorney General stood beside her. A woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. James Mitchell, the Attorney General said, her voice sharp as a blade. You're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder. James's face went white. You can't prove any of this. Actually, we can, Lady Catherine said. She held up a tablet. Security cameras. We've been watching this entire conversation. Every word you said. Every threat you made. The contractors looked at each other. One of them slowly raised his hands. We were just hired for security, he said quickly. We didn't know what he was planning. Smart man, the Attorney General said. Drop your weapons. Now. Yes, they did. The guns clattered on the concrete steps. James backed against the wall. His hands were shaking. This is a mistake. You don't understand. If the truth comes out about Vale's case, it'll destroy confidence in the justice system. It'll open the door to hundreds of appeals. Thousands of cases questioned. Good, the Attorney General said coldly. Let them be questioned. If our system convicted one innocent man, how many others are sitting in cells right now? Better to face that truth than to bury it with more bodies. The royal guards moved down the stairs. They surrounded James and the contractors. Handcuffs clicked into place. James looked at Thomas one last time. You've ruined everything, he said bitterly. No, Thomas said quietly. His voice was rough from smoke, but steady. You ruined everything. 10 years ago? When you chose your career over the truth, they led James away. His protests echoed through the stairwell until a door slammed shut. Lady Catherine hurried down to meet them. "Are you all okay?" "We're alive," Marcus said. "Thanks to you. The fire department is on the way," she said. "Let's get you out of here." They made it outside. Fire trucks were pulling up. Paramedics rushed forward with oxygen masks and blankets. Thomas sat on the courthouse steps, breathing deeply from an oxygen mask. His eyes were closed. Tears ran down his face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were relief. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand. She was crying too. Marcus stood a few feet away, watching the scene. His uniform was covered in soot. His lungs burned, but he felt lighter than he had in years. The Attorney General approached him. "Captain Thorne, what you did today was illegal, reckless, and completely outside the bounds of your authority." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. "It was also necessary," she continued. "Without your actions, Thomas Hartley would have died in prison. An innocent man. And we never would have uncovered James Mitchell's corruption." She extended her hand. "Thank you." Marcus shook it. "Just doing what needed to be done." "The king would like to meet you tomorrow," she said. "He has a proposition. He wants to create a new position, an independent investigator within the royal service, someone who can look into cases where justice might have failed, someone with the authority to cut through red tape and get to the truth." She smiled slightly. "He thinks you'd be perfect for it." Marcus blinked. "I'm just a guard." "You're much more than that," she said. "Think about it. We'll talk tomorrow." She walked away to coordinate with the fire chief. Lady Catherine came over. She had stood on her suit but looked otherwise unshaken. "How did you know?" Marcus asked. "About the cameras?" "I didn't. Not at first," she admitted. "But when James came back and locked that door, I knew something was wrong. I pulled up the security feeds and saw everything. Then I called in reinforcements." She looked at Thomas and Sarah. "You're going to be okay. The pardon will be finalized tonight. Thomas is a free man, and James, he'll face trial, along with anyone else who was involved. This is going to get messy. A lot of powerful people won't be happy, but it's the right thing to do." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for trusting me. You made it easy," she said. "You did something impossibly brave and stupid, but mostly brave." 3 hours later, the paperwork was complete. Thomas Hartley walked out of the royal courthouse as a free man, officially, legally. The sun was setting. The sky was painted orange and gold. Thomas stood on the courthouse steps and looked up at the sky. Sarah stood beside him, her arm around his shoulders. Marcus watched from a distance. He felt exhausted, relieved, and strangely at peace. A guard who'd spent 15 years standing still had finally moved, had finally acted, and in doing so, he'd saved a life. Maybe several lives. Thomas turned and saw Marcus watching. He walked over slowly. "I don't know how to thank you," Thomas said. "You don't have to," Marcus replied. "I do. You risked everything for me. A stranger. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Marcus said simply. "Because if we don't stand up for each other, what's the point of any of this?" Thomas pulled Marcus into a tight hug. For a moment, the stoic guard let his armor drop. He hugged back. When they separated, Thomas was smiling. A real smile. The kind that reaches the eyes. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. "Live," Thomas said. "For the first time in 10 years, I'm going to actually live. Maybe I'll go back to construction. Maybe I'll do something else. But whatever it is, I'll do it as a free man." He looked at Sarah. "We both will." Marcus watched them walk down the courthouse steps together. Brother and sister, free. He stood there until they disappeared around the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "This is Captain Marcus Thorne," he said. "I'd like to schedule that meeting with the king. I have an answer for him." The next morning, Marcus stood in the royal palace. But this time, he wasn't standing guard. He was sitting across from the king himself. The king was younger than Marcus expected, maybe 50. With kind eyes and a firm handshake, "Captain Thorne," the king said, "I've heard remarkable things about you. Thank you, Your Majesty. I want to create something new. A position dedicated to finding the Thomas Hartleys of the world. The people our system has failed. It won't be easy. You'll face resistance, anger. You'll make enemies." "I understand," Marcus said. "But you'll also save lives, restore justice, make the system better." The king leaned forward. "Will you do it?" Marcus thought about Thomas, about the look in his eyes when he'd stepped out of prison, about Sarah's tears, about 10 years lost, but a future reclaimed. "Yes," Marcus said. "I'll do it," the king smiled. "Then welcome to your new position, Captain Thorne. Or should I say, Royal Advocate for Justice." Marcus stood and saluted. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," the king said, "because you've already proven that you're willing to sacrifice everything for what's right. That's the kind of person we need." Marcus left the palace that day with a new purpose, a new mission. He would stand guard no longer. Now he would move, act, fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And somewhere in the city, Thomas Hartley was building again, creating something new, living the life he'd been denied, all because one guard decided that justice mattered more than rules, that doing what's right mattered more than following orders, that sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands, even if it costs you everything.